We want to move to the issue that I think has been a red thread running through the whole show today, as it often always is, which is the ongoing genocide in Palestine and some of the organizing that is going on around the issue of the military supply chain here. And we are very happy to be joined as we discuss this issue by Leah Kayali, who's an organizer with the Palestinian Youth Movement and their Mask Off Maersk campaign. Leah, thanks so much for being back with us.
Hi, Eugene. Hi, Rania. Thanks so much for having me.
Great to have you here. Leah's my mom's name, so I was happy to have Leah on the show. I want to start here. I know we talked about it before, but we've got a lot of new viewers since we've talked about the Mask Off Maersk campaign. I think a lot of people may not even know what Maersk is as an entity, since they don't know a lot about international shipping. I wouldn't blame them. So maybe just tell us a little something like what is and who is Maersk, and what in general is the campaign that you all have kicked off, PYM and your partners as well around them.
Sure, absolutely. So the Palestinian Youth Movement launched the Mask Off Maersk campaign at the People's Conference for Palestine last year. And for those who don't know, and I certainly didn't before we took on this campaign, A.P. Moller Maersk is one of the largest corporations, the most profitable corporations in the world. They're a giant in the shippings and logistics industry, which means that they have a hand in shipping goods all around the world. And they're also deeply invested in the war profiteering supply chain, the supply chain for the genocide against our people in Palestine for the last 18 months. So Maersk has played one of the largest roles as a war profiteer, connecting actually all of the weapons manufacturers that folks have probably heard of, like Lockheed Martin, like Elbit Systems, like Raytheon. Maersk is shipping, millions of dollars worth of parts from these different companies, and also participates in programs like the Maritime Securities Program in the U.S. that actually basically allows the U.S. government to commandeer Maersk vessels to ship weapons components to their allies like Israel. So Maersk is playing a very direct role, which we uncovered even more so earlier in the fall when I think when I was last on the show, when we talked about the direct shipments of weapons components from the U.S. to Israel through the port of Algeciras in Spain. And so what we found is that as we, as a campaign, are able to uncover our research of exactly how Maersk is complicit in the supply chain of death, Maersk is actually being forced to try to walk back their commitments, but also hide behind the fact that this is a large global supply chain, and they're also frankly lying about their involvement in the genocide. And so our campaign is going to continue to expose the ways in which Maersk is profiting off of the slaughter of our people, and we're going to continue to confront Maersk everywhere it goes.
I think this is so incredibly important because it's really like a campaign about material movement of weapons being used to carry out a genocide. And you can correct me if I'm wrong with some of these details, but when you talk about all these different countries whose ports this is going to, we're talking about weapons from Lockheed Martin in Texas making their ways to Israel's Navatim Air Base. And in order to do that, these ships have to go through so many countries. You mentioned Spain. We're also ports in France, Turkey, Morocco. So it's also countries that you can kind of go after here as well, which I think is super important. Also just crazy how many countries are complicit in this genocide, allowing their ports to be used for weapons to move, to go exterminate people. And sorry, I'm just kind of reiterating, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on any of that, or feel free to elaborate on some of those details, because I think it's important for people to understand this isn't just the Pentagon, shipping weapons to Israel, and it's that simple. There are so many factors involved here, and this is just one shipping company you're going after, and it introduces so many ways that we can go after the different mechanisms that are involved in this genocidal network that allows Israel to continue to kill Palestinians in Gaza, in the West Bank, to continue to bomb the entire region. But I guess from there, I just kind of want to ask, in terms of the countries involved, what is PYM, what is this campaign kind of doing in order to specifically go after countries that are allowing these ports to come through? Because some of these countries have laws on the books.
That's right, Rania. So, like you mentioned, the F-35 supply chain is one of the latest developments in the campaign that our researchers from PYM and Declassified have been able to uncover the fact that this week and next week, Maersk will be shipping parts of F-35 with the fighter jets that drop bombs on the people of Gaza that have been directly causing the suffering of our people for a year and a half. The components of those fighter jets are being picked up by Maersk from a Lockheed Martin run Air Force facility in Fort Worth, Texas. They're shipping through Norfolk, Virginia. Actually, earlier today, our organizers confronted that shipment in Norfolk, Virginia. There were over 100 people that had participated in that action, engaged workers at the dock in Norfolk who actually expressed a lot of solidarity with our folks. You know, a lot of these, to your point about, you know, the vast network that is complicit in the supply chain of death. A lot of the workers who are actually, you know, embedded in these docks joined their job because they wanted to participate in the purveyance of life-saving supplies, not because they want to be shipping weapons of death. And so we've found that there's a lot of natural solidarity there. And then similarly, you know, as this boat makes its way up, not just through the Port of Elizabeth, New Jersey, which it will be tomorrow, where people will again be confronting it, but past that through the Mediterranean, like you mentioned, Rania, it's going to be in Morocco, France, Spain, Turkey, and then eventually making its way to occupied Palestine. And so there is a natural base of solidarity in a lot of these places, especially the Arab countries like Morocco, where we've seen people take to the streets and confront the ports and confront Maersk time and again, and they will continue to do so. And I think this pressure is building in a lot of the countries in the Mediterranean, of where they're realizing that either their leaders have been lying to them about how their nations are complicit in the genocide, or the difference between the will of the people and the behavior of the government and the corporations that are participating in this flow of weapons it's an untenable tension. And so I think what a lot of this campaign is sort of showing is that the natural, feeling of people of conscience around the world to not want to participate in genocide is actually creating diplomatic crisis throughout, particularly the Mediterranean, but the world. And I think, it just goes to show the power of a people's arms embargo when we take to the streets, when we make our our refusal to participate in the supply chain of death known. It's really going to be, causing crisis in the upper echelons of the ruling class in these countries.
No, I think it's such a great point, and obviously we have the historical example of South African apartheid, where this became a major issue in the middle of the 1980s, especially in the United States, actually, on the West Coast, the dock workers. So there's such a long history of people, and also the UK, I should add, of people around the world doing these kind of things to bring down similar sorts of regimes and governments. And you certainly speak to that if you'd like. Any reflections, I'd be curious. But I also just want to add on and ask you, I mean, it seems like this also speaks to the overall thought process, I think, of the average person, right? Which is kind of like, how are we actually going to stop this thing? And, I think a lot of times people are looking for kind of the magic key, but it's not necessarily about the magic key, but the multiplicity of different activities and actions. And I think the work that the Palestinian Youth Movement has done has shown this across, everything from protests to teach-ins to Mask Off Maersk. There's a cumulative effect to all these things if we really engage ourselves across the board.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Eugene. And I really think that at this point in our struggle as Palestinians, this is when we show what our organizing is for, right? And it's not just about, like you said, the Mask Off Maersk campaign and actually confronting the supply chain of death itself, but it's about the full picture of the movement. It's about explaining to people why it is that we organize. It's the full fabric, the tapestry of organized people, the confrontation of Zionism, the refusal of the people by taking to the streets in mass protests, the sharpening of consciousness of people through teach-ins and things of that nature, and also the protection of our movement at a time of unprecedented crackdown. We're seeing, obviously Trump trying to scare the movement for Palestinian liberation into silence because, frankly, they see this movement and the cross movement, front that we've developed in this country as a threat. And Trump should be threatened by our movement, right? Because the reality is that people who are watching this genocide unfold and who know that they don't want to be a part of it are also realizing that the ruling class that is enabling this mass slaughter of Palestinians is also is doing so at their own expense. I heard, on the show you were earlier talking about, people being deprived of Social Security, the gutting of the federal government, and the what little protections it gives people in their daily lives in the US. All of these things are connected, and our movement in kind must, connect to these threads and connect people through diversity of actions and tactics, through everything from the mass protests to the confrontation of the supply chain directly, to defending our people who, the students that are being abducted, our immigrant neighbors who are being deported. This is where we show what we organize for. And I think that that's really coming through.
And with all that in mind, I'm curious your general thoughts about this meeting between Netanyahu and Trump this week, and these ongoing comments from Donald Trump about pushing for Palestinians to leave Gaza. He made some comments again about that, and they seem to really be trying to push for that plan. No aid has been allowed into Gaza for the last month. Intentionally so by the Israelis. Their genocide has seemed to, reach a new point of intensity. In a sense, the Israelis seem like they're in finish the job mode. At least it's how they're speaking. So yeah, I'm just curious, what you think all that means a year and a half into this.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, Zionists have claimed that they're finishing the job since 1948, and Palestinian resistance has endured and fought back for, the 77 years since, coming on 77 years of Nakba. I do think we need to continue to keep a spotlight and a megaphone on what's happening in Gaza. Every day, dozens, if not hundreds of people are massacred by the US-backed Zionist regime. And that has only escalated since Israel broke the ceasefire, earlier this spring. But when Trump talks about, ethnically cleansing Gaza, finishing the job, I think we as Palestinians know that, our struggle is a long one. We are connected to our lands, and Palestinians in Gaza and throughout Palestine are not going anywhere, and will continue to fight to remain on their land, and for the refugees for the right to return. I think as this rhetoric continues, we're also seeing the weakenings of within empire, right? Like, I think the cracks in empire are actually also widening in this moment. I think while we know that Trump and Netanyahu are, deep in bed with each other, we also have seen some tensions rise in this most recent meeting. Netanyahu wanting Trump to call off the tariffs, and he didn't get that out of the meeting. There's some tension over the U.S.'s, talks with Iran, and I think that this is really indicating that as empire gets more and more gluttonous in its attempt to stifle the revolution of the people, it's also, that's when the chains in the link of empire's armor are widening and eroding, and that's when we as a people's movement strike, right? That's when we really tighten our organizing and advance our campaigns, when we show people that what it is that these governments are really doing, and that we can provide, an alternative that is something different than endless genocide, endless, wars that the U.S. has been involved in, and endless erosion of our own livelihoods here in the US. And so I really do think that, on the one hand, things do look quite dark right now in Gaza, and it's incumbent on us to keep a spotlight on that and to continue organizing at the, amplifying at the loudest volumes what's happening. It's also important for us to understand the moment that we're in, and the weakening of empire in some ways, as its, greed is really escalating. So I think that there's sort of both sides of that in this most recent meeting.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's always darkest before the dawn, as they say. Quickly, before we let you go, Leah, how can people find out more about the Mask Off Maersk campaign, and if they so choose, get involved?
Yeah, great question. People can follow us on Instagram and check out our website. You'll see that we'll, release when we uncover things about the supply chain and where Maersk is headed, what, the latest sort of war profiteering that's lining their pockets is. We'll let people know about actions at the ports and how to get involved, how to join our global network of people that are planning to confront Maersk everywhere they are. The thing about this target is that Maersk is everywhere. Like I said at the top, it's one of the largest corporations in the world, and therefore we can be everywhere too in confronting it. So really encourage folks to check out our Instagram and the website and get plugged in and organize, wherever you are.
Right on. Leah Kayali with the Palestinian Youth Movement, thank you so much for giving us some of your time here on the Freedom Side.
Thanks for having me.